Hi, welcome back to Something Private. This is a special episode. You guys can tell by the change in music, right?
Ladies and gentlemen, turn it up, go a little something like this. Now drop the beat.
You know the guys that run one of the OG hair removal parlors in Singapore, Strip? Well, they have another brand called Tulips, and they've invited us to join them on their little mission to teach you guys about your little sister. That's right, I'm talking about your vulva. We're clueless and a little embarrassed to talk about our vulvas, but we're so curious and we meddle with her all the time. Just think about all the hair removal hacks and cranberry juice tips all across social media. But caring for your vulvas is more than just an aesthetic conquest. She plays a big part in our overall health and well-being, so how do we keep our little sister well cared for? Join us as we voyage through the Vulva-verse with our friends at Tulips and Strip in a 5-part mini-series every last Wednesday of the month. September is Sexual Health Month, and we thought who better to ask to celebrate taking back control of our health than Ease Healthcare. So, before Ease, purchasing contraceptives could only be done through the prescription from a doctor, which meant long waiting times, expensive consultation fees, and even the unwanted judgment from doctors themselves. So on this episode, we have Guada from Ease, who's from Argentina, to share with us some of the cultural differences in talking about sexual and reproductive health back home as well as in Singapore, some of the common birth control options available and its side effects, as well as why discreet, affordable, and convenient access to birth control is a basic right.
So my name is Guada. I'm the co-founder of Ease. For those who don't know, Ease is a digital health startup that's focused on women's health. We offer sort of delivery of birth control, emergency contraception, at-home STI testing, sexual health consultations, and menstrual health consultations. So we're trying to make the whole sort of women's health experience a lot more convenient, accessible, and discreet.
Before we carry on with today's episode, I'd like to thank our friends at Tulips and Strip for teaming up with us on a 5-part special on vulva care. Strip, which is one of Singapore's OG hair removal parlors, and its sister brand Tulips, which invented the world's first luxury intimate care range, aims to provide solutions for women to feel more empowered in their own bodies. So it's really interesting because I think when we first started Something Private and we were looking for like people in the realm of like women's health and wellness, right? There was virtually nobody besides I think you guys and this other sexual education platform called Shy.
Yeah.
So it's really
Shy.
cool because we've both kind of been in the space for quite a while.
Yeah.
And I think it was quite revolutionary on my end. I had never kind of seen a platform like this before. So tell me a bit more about how did you guys start even to think about, starting a platform like this?
Yeah, I think Ease was very much inspired by our own sort of experiences accessing sexual and reproductive health in Singapore. Both my partner and I had experienced certain barriers to access that made us, think of this idea. I think personally, as a birth control user, when I came to Singapore, I was having a lot of issues accessing birth control, whether it was because, like judgment from doctors that I wasn't expecting or unwanted advice, but also just like the inconvenience of having to go down to a clinic like every month or every few months just to get a birth control refill. I thought it was quite an inconvenient sort of process, right? So back then I started sort of dialogues and workshops at NUS and trying to understand a little bit more whether, this was like culture, like shock, or was it like other Singaporean women also experiencing these things? And so I found out that a lot of people were quite concerned about how, we talk about sexual and reproductive health in Singapore, how we access these services. So that made me realize that, okay, there's a huge demand for this and there is a gap that needs to be filled. From the start, we didn't want Ease to be just a telemedicine platform. We wanted this to be, a community space, a space to ask questions, a space to get information, education. And so, I think we tried to come up with a telemedicine platform that was a little bit more, comprehensive and helpful in certain ways that, could transform a person's life in how they access these things.
I'm very curious to know because I think not a lot of people in Singapore or in like Southeast Asia often think about like sexual health. I think increasingly they are because like platforms are out there to give them information. But I think for you and I, like we kind of both started out cold. So I'm curious to know like what inspired you to start being curious in this space,
That's a really good question. I think we were just sharing before this about how my experiences in Argentina relate back to Singapore, right? And I think even though we didn't have like the best sexual education possible, people were really curious and asking questions from a very young age, I think. And I think our parents and our educators and people were very open to giving us information, guiding us through the process. I personally, for instance, in terms of contraception, I was having, irregular periods. I was experiencing sort of really bad cramps. And my mom was actually the one who was like, why don't we speak to a gynecologist and see, what solutions are out there for you. So that's when I started realizing like, oh, there's a whole journey of sexual and reproductive health. We went down to, the gynae, and she talked about like sort of contraception, the options I had available. She talked about a pap smear in the future and STI test, all these words that, started coming up. And
so, how old were you at the time?
I was like 17. I was quite young, yeah. And I mean, even at that point, it was just like to sort of control my acne, control my periods. But later on, that conversation kind of naturally transcended into, starting to be sexually active and asking those questions that are a bit more sensitive, right? But I think I was quite curious from a young age to understand my body and my health. And I was lucky enough to have people around me to, guide me through that. Yeah.
I think this is kind of a point where I can kind of address like the stark differences in our culture, because when I first got my period, my mom used to tell me like, oh, some of the common things that you can expect to have is like you will definitely get cramps, and like it's just something that you have to live with, And I think on the way until now, I keep telling my mom, I feel like there's something wrong with me because I'm like 25, right? And my cramps sometimes are really, really bad, and she's like, but this is just part of being like a woman. Yeah. And she has never, I think, and it's not her fault, I think it's just like a cultural thing. Like you experience pain and you kind of just accept that this is just what it is to be a woman, once a month. And I think that's very interesting in contrast to like what you experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, this made me think of, partly why we started the menstrual health consultations was because I realized that a lot of my friends are experiencing like severe cramps, right? And yes, severe cramps can be just, a natural part of your period, but sometimes they might be tied to other conditions. It is important to find out what's the root cause of these things, and having someone to just talk to, a professional who can guide you in that process, in that journey of finding out, I think is super important, and making that accessible is just key. If you don't have those support networks around you, like my mom, who was like able to just, take me to a gynae.
I think the other thing that is also quite apparent, I think in talking to like friends, in Singapore, is also a lot of them don't have very good experiences going to doctors, or you often hear like when they go to like their family GPs, which are general practitioners, right? When they want to ask for like birth control, it's often equals to like family planning, right? There's no birth control as a method to regulate like your hormones or like to treat like underlying conditions and like issues that a woman might have.
I think something that surprised me when we started Ease is that we started getting a lot of messages on Instagram from people just sharing their experiences and asking if they could, like, we could share them publicly as well, anonymously, of course. And yeah, it's pretty much the same story over and over, right? People going down to a clinic, facing a doctor who, might not be very aware of birth control, giving, not interested in maybe educating you or providing you with the tools to make an informed decision, and sort of like feeling really lost in the whole process. Like there's a huge stigma surrounding these issues. You can't expect all doctors to know every single part of medicine, right? So, and birth control is sexual and reproductive health is not, some doctors might not be experiencing that, and that's fine, right? But the thing is that they might not be providing you with the information you need to make a decision for yourself, right? And that's really important, and it's something that we're trying to change.
I'm curious to know, when you came to Singapore to or like when you had to change your doctors here, or like to see a gynae to get like the birth control refills, right? Were there any like judgments, or like were there?
I think experience, two different sort of like weird situations. The first one was when I came here, I had to change my brand because the brand was not available. And I explained very clearly to the doctor that I wanted to stay on the same hormonal composition that I was taking. And all brands have the same hormones, but different dosage levels, right? So that to me was really important, and I explicitly said that in the consultation. When I paid for the pills, took them home, I realized that the dosage was completely different. It was the same hormones, but just different. And that got me really upset, because later on I started using them, experienced side effects, like something that I wasn't expecting, because I would have been on them for like 3 years already, right? So that was the first sort of experience that was more on the lack of education from the doctor, and like explaining me, what I was taking, why it had changed. And The second experience was when I missed the pill, so I went very diligently down to the doctor to get an emergency contraception. And basically, I stayed in the clinic for like 3-4 hours. It was a really long queue. And when I came in, it was a male doctor. And basically, he was like, the moment I said emergency contraception, he literally looked down. Like, and I was like, okay, that's kind of awkward, but sure. And he was like, you know, like, you need to take care of yourself. Like, why are you in this situation? And I explained, like, I missed a pill. I'm being extra cautious. Like, I want to take care of this myself, right? And he was super judgy, like just not like giving me all this unwanted advice, as I mentioned before. And the worst part is that I asked for a doctor's note or something that proved that I had been in the hospital, in the clinic for 3-4 hours. And he was like, no, like, you're not sick. Like, I'm not gonna, you know, basically give any note to cover you for this. You know, you should have taken care of yourself. And I remember that phrase, you should have taken care of yourself, so much, because like, it really made a huge impact on how I saw these things, you know, and I felt really ashamed for making that decision, which I shouldn't have.
It's ironic, right? It's like, you are the one that's taking care of yourself. That's why you are here.
Yeah, exactly.
And yet you were misjudged.
I know. I think that was like a huge like moment for me, and that's where all the workshops and dialogues came from, because I was like, it can't just be me that is experiencing this, right? And I didn't think that was an appropriate comment to make. So it's like, you know, are there other women here experiencing the same? And it turned out to be correct.
What are some of the common like birth control options out there, as well as like what are the common negative and positive like side effects?
So I think there's so many options, like honestly at the moment, both sort of hormonal, non-hormonal. There is, you know, the pill, the patch, the ring, the implant, the shot, the IUD, and the list goes on.
Which are hormonal. Well, the IUD is the only one that's like sort of non-hormonal. I think in terms of side effects, of course, they're always tied back to the hormones in the contraceptive method you choose. Most of the contraceptive methods out there have both two types of hormones, right? Estrogen and progesterone, and they provide those hormones in different levels, basically. So how your body reacts to, you know, those hormones is based on like those levels, as well as like how your body receives that. And usually it takes 2 to 3 months, you know, for your body to adapt to it. Some side effects, you know, that people might experience during this sort of 2 to 3 months is maybe headaches, some changes in your period. So it might come a bit earlier or later than expected. You might maybe bleed between periods. Another one might be like nausea, mood swings maybe. It really depends on like how you react to the hormonal contraceptive method that you're using. In terms of benefits, you know, there's acne sort of prevention. There is sort of like it reduces your cramps, like your periods are a lot lighter. It regulates your periods to 28 days. So, you know, some people might have their periods once every few months, so it will regulate it to 28-day cycles. So yeah, there's both, you know, like side effects that, I mean, fortunately, as mentioned before, like because of how much these methods have evolved, they are really temporary and they should go away. And if they don't, it's fine to change methods or to change brands and see which one works best for you. I want to know for you personally, like how has birth control, like taking birth control, like benefited your life?
So I started birth control, when I was 17. Back then it was mostly because I was having irregular periods and really bad cramps. And as mentioned, like I went down to the gynae and they mentioned that it was a good choice for me to stop that pain. Later on, of course, like it was for pregnancy prevention. Right now I'm using it kind of to control my acne breakouts, and it's working really well. I also thanks. I had really bad acne before, you know, and I guess it's for me, birth control is like it's being in control of all these aspects of my health. I also skip my periods with birth control, and that has meant for me that, you know, every month I don't have to skip work because I can't move. You know, I don't have very heavy bleeding. It means I don't have cramps. So it has been extremely transformative in my life. And of course, I am an advocate for birth control, but I'm also not like pushing it onto other people. I think there's so many other contraceptive methods out there, so it's about just choosing what works best for you. But for me, it has been really like life-changing, and it has made me just felt like really in control. And the few times where my brand was out of stock, I literally freaked out, because to me it's basic healthcare at this point. So
I want to ask a bit about like the periods thing. Like,
Yes.
do you not feel like it's a bit unnatural?
That's a very, very fair question, I think. So I had done my research before I started, and I consulted 3 different gynaes to understand. And in fact, actually, I found out just because the first gynae I went to, she was like, oh, like you're experiencing all these bad cramps, blah, blah, blah. I was already on birth control, but my cramps were still a bit bad. And she was like, why don't you just keep your periods entirely? And I was like, you can do that? Like, how? And she was like, yeah, you just, in this case, you just take birth control back to back instead of having a break. So the break triggers, or the placebo pills triggers a period. So I'm just not taking any breaks. So yeah, it's not unnatural at all. In fact, okay, this is kind of like a crazy fact, but the period that you get during birth control is technically not your period, right? Because you're not ovulating, right? So it's sort of a period that gets triggered by the hormones in birth control. Yep. So you can skip that period entirely because technically you're not on your period. It's a lot of information. I think it's, again, it's important to consult your doctor, figure out whether that's something that suits you, that it's good for you and your health and your mental health as well. Like having a period sometimes might make people feel a bit uncomfortable, and that's fine, right? For me, it has changed my life completely, and I'm really happy about it. And of course, I continuously go to the gynae to do checks, and everything seems to be fine. So, and there's a lot of scientific evidence to prove that it's fine. Yeah.
I sigh because like my period, I always feel super incapacitated by my period when it comes in. I'm just so, it's frustrating. I hate it. And I think like it's always been at the back of my mind, it's like, how have humans evolved so far, yet we still haven't figured out a way for periods to not be like inconvenient. And every once a month I'm just like, I can't do this, and it's lame. Yeah. It's a lame look and I don't like it.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I think there are some brands out there, trying out like sort of period sort of technology, like panties and stuff like that like help, make the whole experience a bit more comfortable. But I mean, personally, I prefer just not to have it.
Just to add on to that conversation, I do feel like in my whole like period journey, like it's been exactly like you said, like it's been quite interesting also because like there are so many like different options available out there for you. And for me personally, I've tried like the cup, I've tried like tampons, I've tried like the disc, and it's really a matter of like, I guess like trying to just figure out like what works best for you, and really just being in touch with yourself to know like what works. And with that, I shall go and take birth control.
We're taking a short break. Something Private is a podcast produced under local media publisher Our Grandfather Story. This episode was made in collaboration with our friends and vulva care experts, Strip and Two Lips. If you're someone who takes birth control, you might either be extremely lucky and glowing from the hormone boost, or not so lucky like the rest of us, and sometimes on bad days struggle with conditions like dry skin. But life's not all that hard. Our friends at Two Lips have a product that might just work for you. Rinse is a gentle yet hard-working cleanser that effectively removes any buildup of grime and dead skin without stripping away the skin's natural goodness. Infused with the moisturizing saccharide isomerate and gently exfoliating lactic acid, it leaves your skin feeling smooth and moisturized. All of Two Lips products are gynae and derm tested, which means not only does it work well for more sensitive areas like your vulva, you can apply it anywhere on your body too. Check out twolips.vip to find out more. Now back to the episode.
I think prior to starting the podcast, my impressions of birth control were quite, I would say, warped. Like I mentioned just now, birth control pills and like hormonal contraceptives equates to sexual activity. I used to assume that like taking birth control is a way of pregnancy prevention, and I used to think, why is it that like a woman has to put herself through all these hormonal changes just so that a guy can, not wear a condom? Like, why do we have to suffer the consequences or the burdens of like contraceptives, and our male partners get off scot-free, right? And I think the question is then, how did you guys kind of tackle that question and then convince some of the women in our population that, hey, it's not just about contraceptives, right?
I mean, birth control, I think, means something very different to different women, right? Some people are taking it for sort of pregnancy prevention. Other people are taking it because they have, say, endometriosis, and they're controlling some of the sort of symptoms of endo with birth control. Other people are using it for say, acne sort of prevention, and that's completely fine as well. Unfortunately, the word birth control, the term birth control contains sort of the idea of birth inside it. And I think that's where a lot of the misconception comes from. We're trying to change the conversation into sort of, find out what works for you, what you need, how it can help you, on a personal basis. I think it's becoming more and more of like an empowering tool for women, I think, to take back control of their health, to take back control of their sexual sort of life as well, to be able to say, sure, let's use condoms, but I also feel very secure about the fact that I'm using my own kind of protection. It's important for women to be able to make that decision, figure out what they need it for, figure out if it's the right fit for them as well, and use it for their advantage.
One thing that I'm also a bit struggling to get over or like wrap my head around is that like, why do we have to be the ones that go through like the trial and error in order to see that something works for us?
I mean, there is, I think, a lot of questions surrounding why is there no like hormonal male contraceptive, and I think that's a really interesting question, and I'm hoping that in the next couple of years, we will have the same kind of choices, both hormonal and non-hormonal, for women who might not. I mean, IUDs can be non-hormonal, but for men also to take that burden as well, right? But I guess
vasectomy.
Yeah.
Very intense.
But I think we're lucky as well that I think the pill has evolved so much from like the beginning, right? Like the side effects that birth control had like 15 years ago is completely different to now, right? And we're lucky that the side effects are really temporary. There's more education around them, that we know exactly what to expect, So at least that gives us like a bit more information to make a decision that suits us, right?
Tell me a bit about how this whole realm of like telehealthcare works, because I think it's not super new in that like telehealthcare is something that more startups are looking into now. Like, you can just like call a doctor and then they give you like medicine, right? But I think for sexual health, it's quite new, and you guys are probably the first in Singapore. So tell me a bit about how the process for Ease works.
So for Ease, how it works is you fill up a very short health questionnaire in which you share a little bit about your health history and your preferences. Then you have a short 5 to 10 minutes consultation with a doctor. And then the doctor sort of advises you, the options of birth control available, and what might work best for you according to your health history and preferences. And then we send the birth control to your house. So it's literally just a 4-step process that takes like around like 5 to 15 minutes, and then the delivery is within 4 hours. So it's really fast. And I think it's interesting you brought up that telemedicine is true that it has been in Singapore for quite a long time. And there were sort of providers providing sort of birth control before as well. But I think what we noticed is that a lot of times those providers are providing a service, right? And a very practical sort of convenient service. But I think we wanted to make Ease not just a platform to access these things conveniently, but also where you ask questions, where you get information, where you chat with our women who are experiencing the same things, right? So like a more sort of an ecosystem for women's health, rather than just, here's your pills and you can go.
And I love it. Like I that's definitely the vibe I get from like your social media platforms as well. I feel like my needs are being placed first, like, even though I've never gone through your service yet, and after this I will. But I do get that like idea of like the community and the space that you guys are trying to create. What are some of the differences that you're trying to, or like how you're differentiating yourselves from like going to like a physical clinic, for example?
Yeah, so I think the physical clinic, it's a little bit more inconvenient, I would say, just because you have to usually book an appointment in advance, go down to the clinic, pay for the sort of a trip there and back, and some people might not have time off work, or they don't want to take a leave day just for birth control, right? So I think we're making it a bit more comfortable. I think in terms of cost, with having doctors on telemedicine, that's a little bit more affordable, making the medication also like affordable as well. So yeah, I would say those two things. And I think lastly, it's just like the discreetness of it all, right? Like you don't have to walk down a sexual health clinic and ask for an STI test or ask for birth control, right? You can just get it online from the comfort of your couch. Like, and I think that's really powerful for a lot of women, because it feels like, okay, it's just a tiny part of my day, it doesn't consume like my emotional energy, my mental energy. I can just like buy it in 15 minutes and that's it.
Correct. The walk of shame, I guess.
Yeah.
Like discomfort to the clinic.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do feel uncomfortable, because you're queuing up with other people around you. You know, the pharmacist might be like birth control. You know?
No, it's true. It is true.
And for people who feel a little bit more sensitive about those things, it is important to have that privacy, right?
I just want to share a story about, it's not really birth control, but like recently I had like a bacterial infection.
Yeah.
And then I went to a polyclinic, and then when I collected my medicine, it was this like old uncle who was giving me my medicine, and he was just like, "This is how you apply it, okay?" And I'm like, I feel so bad for him.
Yeah.
And embarrassed lah, of course.
Yeah.
Like, it's so embarrassing.
Yeah,
But anyway, so I understand that you mentioned that you guys provide, besides like birth control options, that you provide STI testing.
Yeah.
What are some of the options available in terms of like birth control? And then what are the common things that like the individuals that come to Ease, what do they look for?
Yeah, so in terms of birth control, we offer birth control pills, birth control patches, and we offer also emergency contraception.
Like Plan B.
Plan B, yeah. So that's delivered within 4 hours, which means that, you know, you can take it as soon as you can. We offer at-home STI testing, so that means that you can basically take the test from home. And you can test for HIV, gonorrhea, chlamydia, basically all the infections. I mean, apart from that, we also offer bacterial vaginosis, yeast infection treatment, stuff like that, and also menstrual health consults. But I would say that I think most people come to us for birth control and for STI testing. I think for the other kinds of conditions, there is still quite a lot of education to do, you know, like what is sort of like a strange like discharge looks like. Is it like uncommon? Like should you look for help? Like I think we're still trying to, you know, create content and inform people on when they should seek help.
Share with me a bit about like your experiences with some of the customers that you guys have, because you mentioned that you are quite into building a community.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that they've shared with you? What are some like memorable experiences?
So I think literally like every single week since we started Ease, we get like people just sharing their stories on Instagram, like DMs, which I really appreciate because it creates that very interesting discussion with, you know, what does the user want? Like what do they need? Like how can we help? Like what are their concerns? And I am really involved in the process of trying to understand that user experience. I think, as mentioned, I think people always bring up like sort of the inconvenience factor, you know, like how it was before and how we're solving that issue, the stigma factor, the affordability issue, and just, I think it's just interesting to hear like these experiences and how they tie back to those workshops that I was hosting back at US. Like it feels like the situation has continued to progress throughout the years, right? These kinds of issues still are a big thing. I had a really memorable experience just like literally like last week. I signed up for this like hockey club. There was like 20 women and they were like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I have this startup called Ease." And they're like, "Oh, Ease, yeah, of course." Like everyone knew about Ease. Some people had used it. Some other people had recommended it to friends. And it was the first time that I realized like, wow, like we are that top of mind brand when it comes to women's health. And that's super powerful, right? Because it means that whenever these women have any issue, like they just like contact Ease and we're there for them. And it felt really like just like heartwarming to know that we're making that change and to see that it's such a massive change that strangers that I've never met in my life are aware of what we're doing and are super supportive. So just a really nice journey so far.
Love it. I think that it's very nice to see the conversation around like taking care of your health and like feminine health and stuff. We are quite ready to have it as a society. It's about like providing the community like these resources, right, and spaces to figure out how they can better live their lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. Let's talk a bit about the fact that I guess for a lot of like brands out there and for a very long time, I think like a lot of businesses were built with men in mind, or like, I mean, there's a saying, right, that it's a man's world, and then a lot of times like how things have been marketed to women in the past were very capitalizing on like their insecurities and like putting women down, making them feel bad. But I think for a lot of the new brands like Tulips, Straight, Ease, I think a lot of you guys have come very far from there in that we now put like women at the forefront of the conversation. We put the needs of like women first. I think my question is for you guys, why is that important, and like how are you guys going to continue doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like platforms like, as you mentioned, Ease, Tulips, Strip, we are all creating sort of a lot of information for people to be able to take control of their health, their wellness, their bodies, right? I think at Ease in particular, we produce a lot of educational content on social media, and I think that has been super key for us, right? Because people feel like if they're not looking for birth control, at least they can come up to ease for information, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's become like sort of that friend that you can always like count on when you have a question or something that you need to ask advice on. And I think it's important that we create more of these educational spaces, create more of community spaces as well, because they help raise awareness, they help create conversations. And I think the more we talk about these things, the more we naturalize, the idea of taking back control over your health, body, wellness, right? And it's been, I think, really powerful to see the effect of that. Like when we used to have these community questions on Sundays on Instagram, and we used to get like 200 to 300 like responses like nonstop. And I mean, they were anonymous stories, so we would just reshare them, and people kept, reacting to them and interacting with them anonymously. And that's when we realized, like, wow, there's a lot of people who want to talk about these things. They just want to, ask questions, like resonate with other people's experiences in a safe space that, that sort of keeps their information private and stuff, right? And at that point, we were really curious ourselves, because even though we had sort of anecdotal evidence of from my friends, from my workshops and stuff like that, we wanted to see if the larger public agreed with us or not. And I remember very vividly, it was like 200 to 300 answers, and we actually run like a test of like negative words and positive words in the answers that we got. And literally like 95% of the answers were like negative experiences. And that was really shocking to see. And I think a lot of people were resharing these stories as well, because they were like, wow, like this is creating, these very important discussions in Singapore that no one's having. And yeah, it was those stories were really powerful every Sunday. And we've asked also, like, what has your experience with sex education been like? Like what has your menstrual health like journey been like, stuff like that, and getting answers from the public.
Cool. So I guess my final question to round up the conversation, right, is why do you think sexual and reproductive health is an important thing that our society needs to have more conversations on?
Knowledge gives us, the tools we need to make informed decisions about things in our life and about our health, our wellness. I think it's important that we get this information to be able to decide for ourselves, for our partners, or to be able to, have those conversations with our partners, to be able to pass on that knowledge to other women who might, not have access to the resources we have. I think it allows us to just feel in control. It allows us to just feel at ease, literally, like just with, what we're deciding for ourselves, I think. And then I think that's such a powerful tool to have. And I think that sexual and reproductive health is part of your overall health, right? And I think with, the whole COVID thing happening in the past year or so, I think people are starting to become even more aware about, their health, and I think also more aware of their sort of wellness as a whole, right?
I think that it's interesting that you mentioned that, like knowledge is important to pass on to one another, because I think prior to being involved in like the women's health space also, if I wanted to find out information about like women's health, it would be in a very like Western kind of context. And it's really nice to see all the different platforms springing up with like information about how to care about like your vulva, how to care about your skin, how to care about like your sexual health. And I think we've been driving home the point for quite long that your sexual health and your reproductive health is equivalent to your health, right? And I think you have to be well read about like these areas, and you have to be accountable not only to yourself, but like to the people around you that you love, and that you have a choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? With the content that we're putting out, we're trying to push that idea of, my body, my choice, and being able to, make decisions for yourself, right? Whether that it's relating to your health, your wellness, and whatever, that sort of choice and sort of like process of self-care looks like for you. We're super supportive of that. And I think that's a message that we're trying to convey in all the materials that we're putting out, right? Like whether self-care looks like, for instance, birth control, like for me, or, like vulva care, or, menstrual, period products that, might help your period be better. Like I think there's so many ways that you can make choices for yourself that make you feel better and make you sort of feel more empowered.
Putting yourself at the forefront.
Yeah, exactly.
Things, right? Yeah. I think you said it quite well. Like it's a very exciting time.
Yeah.
And like it's great that like we have so many options, and like we can put ourselves, first. So yeah, exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks a lot, Guada.
Thanks, Nicole.